Hello, everybody. Welcome to APIs You Won't Hate. I'm Phil Sturgeon, and I'm really excited this time to be joined by the very Kin Lane, also known as the API Evangelist. How you doing, Kin?
Doing very well today. Beautiful sunny day here in New York City.
You're in New York City. I'm so jealous. I used to live there, and I don't now. It makes me
Yeah,
mad. How is it?
it misses you. It misses you, and you should come back.
Have you
That
got
it told me
ice?
directly.
Have
Told
you
me
got have
directly.
you got ice all up in New York City, or are they staying out of there?
I think they're kind of weighing. They're staying out for right now, but it's coming. I'm sure at some point here. I think they
Yeah.
just picked on other second tier cities, or still big, but to test things out, and then they're gonna come here.
Yeah, I just feel like they're gonna get to like the Bronx and wish they didn't. It's gonna be real interesting when they get there.
Yeah, it'll be. Yeah, it's not gonna be pretty.
Like, oops, let's go back to Portland. This was a bad choice.
Everybody loves to hate Portland, so Portland's a good testing ground when you're putting hate out there.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not exactly what we're here to talk about, but excellent. It's been a while since I've seen you in person. You're at all the API conferences, and I don't do those anymore. But hey, what are you up to at the moment? So like you were super involved in Open API for a bit, you were involved with Postman for a bit. Like, what's going on? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so it has been a few years, I would say. So I think when last worked with you and talked, I was a co-director of the Open API initiative. I think at the time I was starting up the Postman Open Technologies program and kind of doing the I don't know the how do you articulate the startup plus open source and open standards. You invest in and you build homes for these places, and so I invested in Open API, Async API, JSON schema. Very keen to invest in Spectral, baby of yours,
Mm.
and you and I kind of connected again around. I mean, we've been on the conference circuit for a while, but I did finished 4 years at Postman, and then I left and spent a year at Bloomberg, standing up an API governance program
Ooh.
there here in New York City. And Spectral was pivotal to that and still remains. But
Huh.
now I've left and I'm doing a startup on API integration and consumption and automation. So.
That's very cool. Firstly, what the heck is Bloomberg doing with Spectral? They just got big APIs and they wanted a style guide, or what's going on there? I've not heard about that one.
Yeah, so I sprawling organization, lots of business domains that are very separate, like legally compliant, like buy side can't talk to sell side, the government people can't talk. Like there's some legit reasons why there's different groups, not all the
Yeah.
other BS reasons the organizations we've worked in don't talk to each other.
That is
Um,
really interesting because usually it's just like this team is in Singapore or some shit, or it's just like that team is run by Gary and I fucking hate Gary. But like the lack of communication between teams is usually not like legally mandated wherever I've been.
yeah,
Even at WeWork, as much of a shit state as that was, that's quite funny.
yeah. Yeah, no, and it's significant, but then there's still other common organizational issues,
Mm.
team topology, tribal. I really prefer to use the word tribe because that's how people, not just at Bloomberg, everywhere, I think, tend
Yeah.
to treat each other. But so map the landscape. Here's all the open API swagger. It was half and half, and then come up with a base rule set, and then your rule set. Guidance out there that is always the place to start with,
Mm.
and kind of assemble that base set of rules that comes with stoplight. But I think you've had several stories that have expanded on it in meaningful
Yeah.
ways, and so applied that base set of rules, and then set in motion also governance of async API on top of that for the event driven, as well as GraphQL. GraphQL was more traditional linting and schema linting rather than spectral.
Mm.
Yeah, just applying a common sense rule set. I mean, minimum viable bar rule set across a 25,000 person org, several hundred APIs, and then watch the chaos that ensues and all the reasons why people can't comply in the design reviews. Oh man, we gotta get this out the door right now, man. We
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
got time for this stuff. You've heard all the reasons.
We gotta push non-standard garbage to production right now that then we'll be trapped with for a million years. But yeah, we couldn't possibly wait another day to fix that before it goes out. That would be bad. Yeah, that is stressful.
Yeah, but they're doing the good work there. They're continuing. They're automating around it.
Yeah, very nice.
And then I think going head first into this whole AI realm that everyone else is being forced into. So yeah. But I left. Been almost a year now, and I'm doing my own startup now, trying to make sense of this madness. And but with the level of control, I think that
Yeah.
me and you in our old curmudgeonly age demand and need. Otherwise I'd go. I was out the door of tech, going to look at do something entirely other, like you have.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, most of my brain right now is focused on the fact that we have spent 2 years waiting for our next bit of land to come through. And as soon as, like, one thing needs to happen, we've got £500,000 just sitting in a bank account waiting to be given to this person. And as soon as they, like, do one thing, it's literally like send one email, we can just buy it. It's so fucking frustrating. We've been here for like 3 months. And what I want to do is go and, like, work with the beavers that are already on that site and design, like, a sweet habitat for them. They're going to love it. I'm going to love working with them. It's going to be a nice time. But instead, yeah, just like hitting refresh on my inbox consistently is pretty stressful. But when I'm not hitting refresh on my inbox, or when I am hitting refresh on my inbox, I'm seeing emails hitting the Protect Earth inbox, such as Rick from current company I won't mention, just absolutely convincing me that I need this new AI startup. This AI startup is going to read all of the emails that hit my inbox in my own voice. I know y'all think I love the sound of my own voice, but god damn it, I actually do not want to hear it all that much. Not like reading an email from an asshole in my voice as well is a weird pitch. So I get pretty frustrated with people sending these AI pitches, sometimes to APIs you won't hate, fair enough. You want us to talk about it. Sending it to Protect Earth, however, does my head in. So I got this email the other day. I responded with, I'm not investing any time or effort thinking about the AI bubble, especially not on this email address you scraped online somewhere. If you thought about the address you were contacting, you would have noticed that the email address is a climate and nature charity, which is being absolutely devastated by compute burning slot machines like the one you're working on. I'd recommend you look for another job opportunity promptly and consider getting into green tech, linked to my article about green tech, what is that and how to get into it, if you'd like to do something constructive instead. Warm regards, right? So I am not necessarily the most reasonable person when it comes to talking about AI. Now, I can back all this up with a long chat. We can talk for fucking 6 hours about why it's a stupid idea. But I did really appreciate your blog post the other day, where you had a few more useful things to say compared to that nonsense that I just wrote to that poor person who's just trying to make a wage. Um, you wrote, I entered into these conversations in the early part of the summer with much empathy for people doing artificial intelligence. Without much empathy for people doing artificial intelligence. You were the same as me and have come out the other side with a lot more empathy for what's happening and where we are headed. I still feel strongly that AI is overhyped and overblown and obfuscates some very dangerous realities around labour, climate change, and copyright. But as I've learned more, I've softened the edge on how I talk with folks about this moment that we're in, and specifically regarding how we are going to address what is next without jeopardizing what we've already built. Now, that is pretty well worded. Do you want to expand on that a whole bunch? Like, what have you learned that makes you not think that everyone working on AI stuff is just being a silly money grabbing numpty?
Well, I mean, I think the bullet points in that, the labor, um, the job precarity kind of part of this, like talking to people, like when you talk to people behind the scenes, they're like, look, like I'm totally with you. I'm anti AI. Please don't publish that or share that or let anybody know that. But I have to, like, this is my job, and I just can't afford losing my job right now.
Yeah.
And so, the AI thing, from squeezing white male mostly, or in Silicon Valley, all the way to Africa, to South America, that spectrum where some of us on the upper end are making $250,000 a year, all the way down to making a quarter every couple tasks that they do or respond to. That labor squeeze is real,
Mm,
and I mean, I think if the powers that be want, they would want us all, like, in working just online, for minimum viable, and kind of that Uber, price surge, kind of like, oh, here's a demand of work, click, 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 and we'll make sure you can barely eat and you won't have health care. So people are genuinely scared, and I don't. want to all, and once people talk to me, it's similar to you. You're not as scary as you sound. You know, you're actually a pretty compassionate guy. Um, Once you talk to people and they realize I'm not as scary and mean, I want to hear like what are their challenges, and they don't want to lose their job in their healthcare, especially in the U.S. healthcare. You
Yeah.
know, like we don't, you lose that, and then now you're going to lose your H-1B ones. You're not going to be here as an immigrant. So there's a lot of other things that get in the way of me just being a complete asshole right up front.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, obviously the in most companies there's the suits who don't really know anything about anything, who have just heard that like this is the future. Because there's two types of suits. There's the ones that know that this is bullshit and are pushing it to make money, and there's the ones that don't know that this is bullshit and are desperately trying to keep up so that they can make some money. I mean, that's just capitalism right there. But I feel like yeah, there's a lot of people in the C-suite just being like, wow, yeah, AI is going to be the thing. We're going to do AI, shove it in everywhere, make some money. And they're all British, even if it's in Silicon Valley. That's just the money. That's the money guy voice that I do. I don't have another one. Um, yeah, so obviously the people being given their deliverables, like KPIs get set, product targets are given, sales are being told, sales are always like defining the roadmap of just like we told everyone that we can do this and now you have to go figure it out. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
layers of business in between kind of the person who's writing the feature, and I'm never usually mad at them. It's just yeah, a lot of I feel like basically my thing with AI, especially in the API scene, we could talk about AI in general, that's huge. But like in the API scene, there was an API Days conference I went to. I don't remember what it was. I think it was 2020 in Paris. And it was like before they started doing AI tracks. And it was just like everyone was there that year talking about AI. Obviously, that's why they got AI tracks after that. And it was just loads and loads of people being like, we are developing this tool, which means that to you don't ever need to integrate with an API ever again. You don't ever need to think about any of the data that's being handed around. You can just have a random API and you can generate a random front end for it based on vibes, and it will just be brilliant and absolutely fine. And he got the whole way through his 45-minute odd talk going on about how you never need to write integration code ever again and it will all just work perfectly. And the first question was like, so how does any of it work? Is it literally, can you just point it at any API like you've been saying, or like do you have to build certain conventions into your APIs? Like, yes, well, you do need to like rewrite your API to follow these specific, very restrictive rules and guidance and everything else, right? And obviously, this is what became the precursor for MCP. They wanted to add a layer in between a perfectly good functioning API and whatever bullshit the slot machine required to function. And so that it was frustrating for a long time that like my very first introduction to it in the API world was someone lying through their teeth and then crumbling under the very first follow-up question they got. But since then, people just seem to have got better at hiding some of that, and it's never got better at functioning. It just seems to be they're better at selling you on the product and convincing you that you should try really hard, by which point you're kind of locked in. So I haven't been delving into the kind of products as much lately to see if they've got any better. And I'm sure people are working hard on solving it. And I imagine that may well be what you're trying to do, right? Like make this stuff work good. Because from the early days, I kind of went, and then I just kind of stopped paying attention. Like, how do you see AI helping nicely with integrations? Like what do you do to make it be useful beyond the demo in a talk that gets people signing up to your product and then wandering off after they've paid you for a few months and it hasn't worked, but you still had them paying for a few months?
Yeah, I'm less, I mean, there are very few things I use AI for that are useful and practical. I generate some schemas, and I always, I'll pass it a pricing page URL or the content from a pricing page for a SaaS, and then I give it a JSON schema and say I want that pricing page in that schema, and I do that programmatically. I do that fairly common. I'll do it with rate limit pages. I just have
Nice.
standard schemas for those things that I do because I don't want
Mm,
just my docs to be. machine readable. I want my pricing, rate limits. I want the whole package,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole experience to be. So I do use it for some of that, but beyond that, like I don't use it to edit stuff. I like writing. I like editing my shit, even though I screw it up sometimes and mess up, because that's how I learn. So like I don't want to offload that stuff. I guess where I'm finally finding a market fit after, this is after a year of just going, I'm gonna go do something else because I just don't see any sense in this. Like, and then talking to enough people and then realizing, oh, they're like, they've been doing interesting things at interesting companies in interesting industries. And then they just have some clown boss that came to them and said, hey, you got to do this, you got to do MCP.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to help them, do, because they've got some mandate to do a co-pilot or something that augments their tool so they can be like GitHub or Microsoft or something. And my goal is to just make it as low impact. You can use your existing open APIs, how to maybe add vendor extensions, how to expand your spectral rule set a little bit. So how do you build on that existing work to meet this demand? It's less, hey, what can you do with AI? That's super cool. I've got a few use cases, and I think you have one or two, but I don't at all feel compelled to like find interesting use cases for AI for anybody. There's plenty of clowns and people out there who are interested in doing that. But I am interested in helping us all keep our jobs, maintain our businesses, not go bankrupt, and
Yeah.
not totally mess up the world if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I I've been really enjoying kind of the, as much as I've kind of had this kind of Luddite in the proper definition of it approach to AI, of just like, I don't hate technology, I hate when it completely replaces labor and makes everyone's lives worse, which is what the Luddites were about, right?
Thank you for
I
that, by the way. Thank you for that
Yeah.
real definition.
Exactly. That needs to be said more because people just toss that term around like, you hate computers. I'm like, I've defined my entire fucking life by computers. How
Yeah.
dare you? Like I even run like a reforestation charity now that uses like a whole bunch of tech. We've literally got an API in the background that shows you where our trees are and like it powers the entire company. I don't hate tech. I hate arseholes doing arsehole shit for money with tech. Um, the
Amen.
I do I do occasionally find like a wonderful use of AI that actually brings me joy. So we were speaking on, I think it was the last episode, with Tom from Wiremock, and they have a mocking system which does a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like mocking does a million things, but they were talking about how they actually kind of edge into testing and edge into fuzz testing, and their cloud offering can like use AI to create useless requests that you can see how your API handles. I was like, that's fucking genius. That's like, create a request that tries to do this and like make a bunch of mistakes. And like obviously that last part is redundant. It was going to do that anyway. That's what it does. And so to use AI slop to be slop, and test how your API handles slop is brilliant, because the requests that were going to hit your API for years and years and years were going to be poorly constructed by someone that didn't read the docs or didn't know you had docs or you didn't have docs, right? There were going to be bad requests coming in. But now it's just used like this entire swath, this entire treasure trove of the entire internet of dumb mistakes to creatively cock up requests to your API. And you can see how your API responds to those. Like, that's obviously brilliant, and that's not melting the planet. So like I do like it when people find good things. I think a lot of the problem has, for me, is just it's obviously exactly the same people who were really excited about crypto and that didn't go anywhere. And they're really excited about NFTs and that didn't go anywhere. And they got really excited about AI and that's not really, the bubble hasn't blown yet, so they're all still really excited about it. But it's that, is seeing the exact same people, the exact same like snake oil salesman, just keep pushing bollocks. So when someone can go, well, actually, there is this very limited use case in which I think it can genuinely really help. I'm like, brilliant, do it. I actually quite
Yeah.
liked Optic. So before
Yeah.
Optic got bought out by Postman, they were
No,
working on.
Atlassian. They
Oh,
got
it's
bought by
Atlassian. Sorry, yeah,
Atlassian.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was Postman bought a similar learning tool, which
Oh,
was
Akita.
Akita. Thank you very much. Yeah, I always confuse those two. But yeah, Postman bought
They were
Akita,
similar. They
Atlassian
were
bought
similar and
Optic.
competitive. So
Yeah, and Optic had that Lint GPT. And
Hmm.
there was a little minute where I was like, this is actually pretty good. Like I've written some rules that Spectral couldn't handle. And it was like, uh, watch out for any fields that have PII in the response or something like that. And
Yeah, yeah,
it would
yeah.
it very inconsistently and non-determinatively, but quite well, occasionally spot some fields that I wouldn't have thought of, that I wouldn't have put into a big if field name equals array in
Mhm.
Spectral. So there have been some things that I think are pretty cool. Have you found any other little bits like that that you think it's really helping with?
Yeah, I mean similar ones that are verifiable. So if you can link it to, some sort of determinism with a JSON schema, I have quite a few a toolbox of use cases because um, I have a specification called APIs JSON, which is billed as API discovery, and that's what most people think of it as. But for me, it's
Mm,
about discovery of APIs using crawlers, so that kind of
mm,
discovery rather than developers discovering APIs. But I crawl GitHub and I crawl Bing and I crawl Google via partners for APIs. And when I find docs and there's no open API present, I will auto generate an open API from that. But I validate it with
nice.
the JSON specification. And I also do that for pricing pages, rate limit pages. Because I want the whole portal, the whole experience to be machine readable.
Yeah.
So it's for discovery, for other purposes, but it doesn't tend to align with API providers or why people think things should be machine readable. So it hasn't ever moved forward as fast. But I find it useful for that because I can validate it with a JSON schema coming out of the output, and that helps me. And I use that I generate spectral rules sometimes too from that
Mm,
landscape, and then I validate them because there's a JSON schema for spectral rules, which I'm sure you know because you've helped create
right.
it.
Yeah.
And so like these things are validatable and you can make them deterministic, and they're low. Like I'm not using them in runtime, I'm using them in design time, so the risk level is lower. So for
Yeah.
low
Yeah.
risk things I can make deterministic, hell yeah, I'm on board.
Okay, so where's the AI involved in that? So you're crawling through search engines, and then
Hmm.
what do you do? You find an API and you start like generating APIs.json with AI. So it's like, is that where does the AI
No,
get
I won't.
involved?
So I won't generate the API's JSON. So here's the one that I just did with it's a little inception level for
Mm,
Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. Okay,
mm,
so there's some of them have OpenAI has an open API for their API. Ooh,
yep.
that was a hard one to say.
Yep.
Claude, I couldn't find one. Gemini has a discovery doc, so I needed to converge on OpenAPI 3.1 across that. So I helped it,
Mm,
had it do that for me. The API's JSON I use as scaffolding, so I don't need it to generate that. It's pretty basic stuff. There's not, but the individual properties docs being that first one, Open API. So if there's not an Open API, or if there's often a Swagger, how do I get to the Open API 3.1? If there's a RAML, if there's a Postman collection, if there's a Bruno collection and Insomnia, like how
right.
do I get to Open API 3.1? That helps me. But then with Claude and Gemini and OpenAI, I want their pricing and rate limits, their headers and all of that. And I want that all machine readable because
Mm,
I want to automate the usage and the A/B testing across these. So you should be able to route to Gemini or Claude for different purposes. And
yeah.
I want to know the cost. What's this going to cost? Is it a cost-based decision? Is it quality based? That kind of thing. And so having the pricing, the rate limits, and so they all three have usage-based pricing, the count you're in, or excuse me, user-based pricing, the user account you sign up, you pay monthly. They have usage on the API,
Yep.
traditional cloud-based usage, and then they have model-based pricing, and then they have a fourth, which is called tier. So how much money I load up in my credit card on Claude determines how my rate limits and my costs are. So there's this spread of costs that
Mm,
I want to automate. And so using each of those services to do the little incremental pieces of automation, not the overall scaffolding. That's my vision. That's what I need. I'm finding value in that. And but it's me doing the homework all along the way.
yeah. Okay, fun. That's pretty nice. I've not played around with too many of the specific providers. I mean, like, I think most of my AI interaction is like VS Code has just wedged a bunch of it in there, and every now and then it makes recommendations at me that are just absolutely horrific, and then I say, no, go
No,
away. Um,
exactly.
it spends a lot of time trying to help me write articles, and I'm like, no, this I can make money by typing words. Don't type words for me. I will type better words than you anyway. And but then
Hmm.
sometimes I feel like it's just vomiting entire paragraphs of stuff I wrote because I feel like the Open API writing about Open API is a pretty niche section of the world, and like it will recommend a paragraph. I'm like, that's my fucking paragraph, man. I wrote
I'm sorry, just
that.
the probabilistic realm. Dude, you've
Yeah,
written significant portion of the open API
yeah, yeah,
content
yeah.
out there, so thus it is still.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, it started like if you try and write about OpenAPI with Copilot on, it will use British English and swear a lot. Um, anyway, that's probably enough about AI. I mean, I think we talked about it in general, but like, what specifically? What is your startup up to? What are you? What's your plan? Or is it early days? You
Uh,
don't really know.
I mean, literally, it's early days, and so literally, it's finding that approach that I can come at it without holding my nose or losing my soul, and
Yeah. Okay.
confidently build a startup and then go out and be the face of it. So that's been the last 5 6 months because I came into it with the same feeling as you, and so I think I've got that, but it's and it kind of speaks to specifically to MCP and the specs. I think is what more yours and mine's wheelhouse is. It's less about AI, and for me, it's about the power grab of the digital bits, which has been going on for a long time. I mean, Postman, Open API stole Swagger, like that politics and business across those bits.
Yeah.
RAML, API Blueprint, everyone was fighting over the spec bits. We landed on Open API, it's in the foundation, but you and I know there's still SmartBear and MuleSoft kind of fingerprints on that struggle for the bits, but it's in the
Yeah.
foundation. Um, since then, we've had Type Spec from Microsoft, Smithy less so from AWS, but OpenAPI is the solid player. I mean, the big players out there have OpenAPI specs: GitHub, Plaid, Twilio, Stripe. They all have OpenAPI, so that's the de facto standard. But then
Mm.
GraphQL came along. There was that power grab around GraphQL, and this is the thing, and it's kind of shrunk back. People realize, there's still a market, there's still use, but it's not the silver bullet. It was going to replace REST. We had a little with event driven along the side,
Yeah.
but now we have MCP, which is just JSON RPC and another kind of power grab at these digital bits. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on is like I'm trying to sell to customers who still have SOAP and still have WSDLs,
Yeah.
and trying to not to get them to not step away from their open API and their spectral governance that they've invested in for like the last 7 8 years and chase this new shiny thing. And
Right.
but how can they deliver it without too much cost and too much shift? So it's in that wider landscape, that 25-year view of the things that I'm trying to orient what's going on with MCP and AI. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the yeah, there's definitely those companies that are like, yeah, still on soap and things that came before it. And they yeah, 7 or 8 years thinking about switching to a new thing whilst they work through that and really spec it out. Like big companies, slow roadmaps. Like I think a lot of us forget that that is a thing that exists. Like the thing for me that was always really annoying about GraphQL was that people were like throwing away a REST API they built 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, because they thought they needed to go run off and do GraphQL to do a thing which was perfectly possible and reasonable and common to do with a REST API, be it sparse field sets or compound documents. And so I always got really frustrated about like if if your REST API after a year or two is so bad you want to throw it out, completely redesigning everything in a brand new paradigm that you don't understand yet. is not going to make that better, right? Like it's going to be worse than what you currently have. And so I spent a lot of time trying to just get people to pump the brakes a little bit. And yeah, like there's just how do you build, how do you design and plan an API that's going to be useful and usable for more than a year? Because I feel like half the people we worked this happened. A lot of people went from REST to GraphQL, running straight back to REST, going, actually, it was fine over there. I'm just going to make this one tweak, or just like adding a GZ compression, gzip compression header will probably help, or switching the JSON parser means that we don't need to completely switch to some other gRPC. There are these like small improvements that could be made, and I want people. I spent a lot of time focusing on helping people improve where they're at, but I was always trying to help them improve the rest so they didn't have to run off to something else or rewrite to another rest. But I do
Mhm.
like the idea of like you're there saying, hey, you're on SOAP right now. Rest is going to be a good step forward for you if you do it like this. Please don't run off and just AI generate some slop. Like you've spent 8 years
Mhm.
thinking about how to build this new REST API that will solve all your problems. Go in, make API hot into a prompt isn't gonna help. So um,
Yeah.
that's a really
Yeah.
funny use case. You talk to different people to me.
Yeah, it's the, I mean, think of MCP as just GraphQL. It's
Yeah.
just for a different, consumer client audience. And as I see it, it's one tool in a large toolbox where REST is still the simplest, cheapest to do. And it's going to get to your widest audience of people who can produce it or consume it. There's most tools to document and govern it. And then, yeah, there's times you need events, but not everyone needs Kafka. Webhooks work real well.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's sometimes you have a specific team who knows the schema. It's a massive schema, and their front end developers get out of their way, give them a GraphQL endpoint. And I'm guessing there's situations where we want MCP, but the problem is every wave of these coming along, going, you've got to rework your whole base and come over to our platform, and it's the latest, snake oil from whatever venture capital, and people jump, and then they don't realize that in 3 or 4 years there's going to be an exit, and the
Mm.
enshittification sets in, and that's the way it is.
Yeah. That is always the way. I think there's also like something we've both been pretty annoyed about is that in all of these like emerging markets, there's an immediate money grab of like cool hot startups with a brilliantly beautiful marketing page and a snazzy title that are just there to be like, we've solved every problem that you never know existed. And they come out and they make a bunch of really cool stuff. And then they might settle down and like by version 3 or 4 or 5, they're like making some genuinely really useful stuff. And I've seen so many of these companies like Optic. They were on like version 9 within 2 years or something. They rewrote their stuff so many times. I have no idea how Aiden had time
Hmm.
for this, but like they were making some really useful stuff. And Stoplight, like when I joined, they were on version 4 of the SaaS platform at least, and they'd rewritten Prism 3 or 4 times from Golang to TypeScript, and it was getting pretty useful. And like Spectral was the third version they'd written, and it was a rip-off of 2 versions of Specky before that. Like you kind of get this like quick burst of just like, we're really excited about stuff. We're gonna make loads of things, loads of things, loads of things. And it takes a little while to settle down and become genuinely useful. And then you've got this golden little time where things are genuinely really useful, and then the massive corporates just swing by and snatch everything up. Like I was writing about Apiary closing down. Apparently, them putting a little banner on Apiary. If anyone's not familiar listening on the podcast, because there are other people here, not just me and you, I keep forgetting this. Apiary kind of built that API blueprint format. It was one of the 3 main rivals before, the Open API, RAML API blueprint. They made API blueprint, pretty useful, loved it. It was my first introduction to API descriptions, and I was a big fan. Um, they made that whole thing, and then that was like 10 years ago. I was working with that, 2016. They recently put a banner up. It was apparently a bug. It wasn't intentional. It was a bug that said like, "Hey, we're closing this down in September. Y'all better shove off." Apparently that was a bug, but it's like no one's cat got on the keyboard and typed out that prompt. Like they're clearly about to get rid of it, even if it wasn't meant to go live at that point. So yeah, like obviously being bought out by Oracle, they've been closing down the paid pricing. They've been suggesting people move over to Oracle Cloud. They've been completely failing to write a new feature for almost a decade. Like these, an API was amazing. An API Blueprint was amazing, and the tool suite was amazing. Dread was amazing. All these things, and that seems to just be on repeat throughout the API, especially Open API world, which is cool new startup. They go for a while, they get a few rounds of funding, they get really big, they get really useful, and then some giant boring corporate buys them, merges them into a really unflattering uh, platform where you can barely find that functionality, and you've got to pay $5 squillion to get anywhere near anything above the free plan that doesn't do anything before you can even start trying to find the functionality that used to be reasonably priced. Like, how do you feel about that? Why does that keep happening in APIs? Is that just capitalism and we're a bunch of moany little socialists on the internet, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean it's just capitalism with venture capital tacked on, and that velocity, and not pumping the brakes, and not slowing things down. And I don't think we're going to stop it. We're going to change it. I mean, you know how taking on capitalism, we're not going to win, bro. Like we're not. There's no way. But there's ways we can slow that down, change it, shift course, and do things, and make and still make the world a better place. And so API was a big deal in the moment. Like Swagger wasn't a spec to begin
Yeah.
with. It was a config file for the docs and the code gen,
Mm.
which both suck. Like, but they were groundbreaking in the moment. And then API came along and was like, oh, wait, hey, how about if we create a good spec and not just a config schema,
Mm.
and do this intentionally and create a set of tooling that's going to help us be design first. So it was a big deal, and it still resonates in the space. That the concept of design first came from that
Yeah.
realm, and people like you and I have championed that. So that's just the cycles. I mean, it's like, whatever the tool is, Smart Bear. I mean, Smart Bear takes advantage of acquiring and kind of building a patchwork of quilt that they've acquired. Then they don't do anything else with them when they go forward. MuleSoft was just rocketing towards an acquisition. Postman's on its own. All of these have their own kind of trajectories. But yeah, like grabbing up anything nice in the space and owning it. That's how you buy relevancy. I mean, like Smart Bear, if you can't innovate, you acquire relevancy. That you acquire
Yeah.
innovation. So that's what you do. But we can slow them down with open source. But open source isn't a save all, Specky to Spectral to
Yeah.
wherever we're at today. Like open source isn't going to save our soul, but it's one way we can give back to the community along the way. And I like spending venture capital money on open source. I think that's a worthy cause. Trees, spending it on trees if you can.
Yeah.
So it's the way things are. We have to live in it. I think we have to get creative about how we still not lose ourselves.
I mean, it makes it hard to get excited about new players in the space sometimes because I see new things come out and I'm really and I'll share them around like Speakeasy do an incredibly good SDK generation where you don't have to install
Yeah.
Java and Scalar, like recreating most of the kind of open source foundational layers of open API stuff that have just been completely unmaintained for so long, like Swagger Pass are being replaced. Brilliant. They've done loads of open source stuff and they're starting to roll out more and more products on top of that. Yeah, Bump just being like, here's one single CLI command you can run and your docs are all hosted. Like these tooling providers are the underdog and they're scrappy and some of them are more early days than others, but like they're going and they're doing really useful stuff. And then I'm writing like, hey, these things are great, you should go use these things. And then the more that you say, hey, these are great, you should go use these things, the more the chance of them just getting acquired by an arsehole company that fires everyone and like deletes the code increases. And it feels like I'm just like the gentrification of the API tooling space of just like it gets good for a little bit and then it's just and it's completely unaffordable and terrible. Um, so it's hard to to be in that cycle, I guess, is all I'm thinking. Because
But look,
stop, Go on.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
I
you
was
off.
just going to say, like, Stoplight being the main example, like, pouring I was an insider. I was working there for a long time, product manager, project manager, really, really like making those tools what they were, and then they've just been like, some of it was copied and pasted into Swagger Hub, and then a lot of it's just been kind of ditched, right? And so it's hard whether you're working on it, advocating for it, or being just the person at your company that says, hey, this
Mm,
thing's cool, we should use that. And then you're the person that's responsible for making this entire company reliant on something that's vanished 6 months later. It's really
mhm.
hard. I don't know how to feel about any of that. It just makes me angry.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Dread earlier. Like, frick, I've been tempted to revive Dread like two or three times over
Oh,
since
yeah.
it's gone
Hell yeah.
away. And there's other tools that are similar to that. So I mean, it kind of feels like, like the business you're in is like, how do you plant trees on land that there's all this history? I mean, there's so much history in the UK as far as who owns this land and who has access to this land and
Oh, let me
who
tell you a
can
story
who
after we've recorded. Yeah.
who owns the resources on that land, who
Yeah.
doesn't, I know there's just a lot of politics, business and politics, and it's the same in this virtual world we're building. So it's like what I want to try to figure out, and this is what I'm trying to do with my startup now, is be honest about with investors and go, look, we're building open source and we're going to be building stuff that's going to stick around. We're going to build community. There's a trajectory. It's going into Linux, CNCF, Apache. It works with those existing tools. We know the standards that are out here. So we're paying attention to all the fences and landmarks and paths and trails and communities that you would be paying attention to with trees. How do we get people giving a shit about this? But leave a mark, but acknowledge that in 10 years, when that new, I don't know, battery factory goes in and land priorities change, we're going to need to ship, so it's like,
Yeah.
there's no constants, I guess. We just got to do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good things can't last forever, but they can be handy for a while. Um, cool. I mean, on that note, we are probably about out of time, but I feel like I could talk
Yeah.
to you about a million things forever. Um, where can people find more of you, and what is the name of the startup that you're working on right now?
I mean, as always, API Evangelist will always be Ken Lane and be my. I'll never sell it to anybody. I'll bury it before it, And I still write there and I still rant there, but I don't care about social media or traffic or anything. It's just
Yeah.
my. It's kind of like your brand too. Is just keep it going.
Yeah.
But I'm building Navtico, which is Greek. It means navy. We don't have a product yet. We just set up the company. It's a European company. We set it up in France,
Nice.
and we got more. We'll be launching it here coming up this early winter, late fall, and we'll have more. But we don't have a site. You can find us on LinkedIn, but API Evangelist is where you can see what's going on right now.
That's brilliant. I'll shove some links in the show notes for everyone listening, and yeah, they can follow along. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's nuts that we've had however many episodes we've had. It'd be too boring to count, and I've definitely lost track. But we've been going for years. We've never had you on. That's nuts. So thank you for helping me rectify that.
Anytime, anytime, and keep up the good work you're doing, my friend. It's important stuff.
Thank you very much. All right,
Not
cheers,
not the
folks.
AP, not the API stuff. The API stuff isn't important. The tree stuff.
None of this matters. The true stuff is important. Yeah, this is very true. Thank you very much.